Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of do a little bit of a workflow with how I made this little model, and then the different steps in the process, whether it's different tools extracting like I've done here, or even the actual um, brushes that I use to do some of the modeling and the sculpting on the main model. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in one of my first saves of this, where it was just the model or the guy. Alright, so this is really low subdiv. We're looking at like only 15,000 polys, and here's like 900. So when I originally started this, I actually started it from a maquette, which was just one that I had saved out from ZSpheres, and then I basically tweaked it to look like the reference photo, or at least the best that I could get it from this low subdiv, and then moved it up, started pulling out volume. And we'll just go ahead and go into that right now, since that's pretty much the very first thing that you're going to go ahead and do when you end up starting from ZSpheres, because they don't give you very much volume unless you really, really, really work them, and you're not probably going to be doing that. So you're going to want to bring ZSpheres in, just a real skinny guy or skinny girl, whatever you're working on, monster, and then pull it out and get some volume once you've created it as a skin here in ZBrush. So like if we were doing a guy that might be a little bit chunkier than this, we'd probably want to start pulling out volume. Now, I'm using the move brush right now. It's up in your brush palette, and if you've used it before, it's going to be up here. If not, it's hidden. It's like way down here. So once you've got that out and using it, just use its default settings over here, unless you need it for something very specific. And when you start just dragging on your model on the mesh, it's going to look kind of funky like this, unless that's what you're going for. But what you want to do in order to give volume is hold down the Alt key and pull in and out, and that's going to use the mesh's normals. And as you pull out, it's going to come out straight from where you pull, or if you push in, it's going to push in straight from where you pull in. So that's how I pulled out all this volume, is just kind of going through and pushing in and pulling out in certain spots. And it's tedious, and I don't have a fantastic knowledge of anatomy, so I just kind of go based off of like hero anatomy. And eventually you can just keep dividing and getting a little bit more specific with it. And then at this level, you might even want to start with the clay brush, which I like to go to second. A lot of people do. After you got the volume, you pull out the clay. It's very broad strokes. It lays down a lot of hypothetically, I guess you could say clay, but volume. And you can get a look at this level of just like adding volume. But instead of like the move brush just pulling out chunks of volume, you can actually paint the volume on with the clay brush. So that's how you get things like adding on some muscles here in the forearms, or getting some definition for the deltoids here. And went through and kind of did a rough version at this low poly. Go ahead and bring in the next save. This is a much higher poly. This is 250,000, and it's at the 5th level of subdivision over here. So at this point, I had still been working with the clay brush, but at this high subdiv, the clay brush is very different. At least it looks and feels different. you can kind of see it's more rounded. It's still going to build volume, but because there's more points and polys to work with, you're going to be able to get kind of more of that muscle definition and tone that you might be working with. And by the way, I don't know if I've told you, but and if you know, the pressing Alt and doing your brush strokes with any brush is going to do the opposite of what the normal would do. So, for instance, this is not pressing Alt and get that line, and this is pressing Alt, digs at it. So that's how I'm getting more of the definition here. So anyway, you can see how you can spend hours and hours and hours, especially if you know really, really good anatomy, on getting these muscles, this definition in your sculpture. And then go ahead and go to the next one here. Oops. So that's the last one. So this one's going to be all the tools as well, or not tools, but extractions. So I'll make this a little bit simple here. It's going to be under subtools, and so you'll see that like this is my main mesh from my model. But then what I've done, and in the speed sculpt you can probably see it, but what you would do in order to extract something, for instance, boots, you are basically going to paint a opacity mask onto the main mesh in order to get the shape that you want to extract from that. And I'll do that real quick here for you. To get a mask, you're going to hold Control and drag or paint, and there's so much you can do. You can mask by dragging out like this by holding Control 2 and pulling over large sections, or you can even use alphas up in here, and oops. I want to drag rectangle and then choose an alpha. That was not masking. Okay, so what I've done is I've got it set here just for a brush, but when I hold Control it changes, so you just need to change it to drag rectangle and mask, and then it'll drag it. Now I've got symmetry on, so it's going to go ahead and do a symmetry one here. And then once you've got the mask that you want to go ahead and extract, it's going to extract it from whatever subdivisions your model is. So what you'll want to do, probably, unless you want it to come in at a very high subdivision, is lower it down. Even though you might not be able to see it, you'll hit extract. I think it's because it's too light. Pull up the intensity. This might not be a good example. So I'll just draw something. So like, let's say he's got some kind of armor on his chest here, and you just want to extract that piece. Probably want to bring that subdiv down just a little bit, not too far, maybe like right here, and extract it. You have to accept it, and then you can bring the main model back up to normal. And then in the tool, or in the subtool palette here, underneath wherever you just extracted it from, it's here. It's still masked, so you drag a little rectangle outside and nowhere, and it'll get rid of the mask. And then this is the tool that you've extracted from the main mesh. So it's its own tool. It can be subdivided thousands and thousands of times, and you can do what you like with it. You can basically move it around like if you want to do symmetry, press X. It's going to move both sides, and you can kind of move it off of him a little bit to show that it's not right on top of his skin. Smooth it out so it doesn't look like his abs. Shape it whatever you want to do. And that's how I got all of these tools, so I'll get rid of that since I don't want that. Delete it. And then I go through here and see if I can turn on all these tools. Okay. So I got everything extracted here. I drew on like the chains. I drew everything except, well, the skirt or kilt, whatever you want to call it. I didn't want to extract like from his legs and his belly here what's underneath. So I figured, well, I'm just going to go ahead and extract by doing a mask basically over like a portion of him like this. And then what that would do is I could extract one of those legs and then just morph it and pull it up here. And it worked out pretty good. It looks pretty much like the reference. So anyway, that's just kind of a brief workflow of what I did to do this and what I do if I do want to do any kind of a sculpt in ZBrush.